Welcome, you're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. Over the past 4 years that Ukraine has been a part of an armed conflict with Russia, the main question on the agenda was how to live in the country that is in the middle of a war. However, post-conflict period is no less important for Ukrainian society. The Committee on Human Rights, National Minorities and International Relations of Ukraine has held a roundtable called Transitional Justice as a way to overcome the consequences of conflict and armed aggression. To tell us more about it, we're joined in the studio today by Taras Tsimbrievsky. He is the head of USAID Human Rights in Action program. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, first things first, I would like you to explain to me and our audience what transitional justice is.
Indeed, transitional justice is a brand new for the Ukrainian society, yet it is a very familiar topic for the experts. And let me deliberate on this issue and put it in more simple words in order to make proper clarifications with respect to transitional justice. The essence of the transitional justice means that this is the instrument to deal with the consequences of the armed conflict on the territory of the country which is war-torn. In accordance with this, it has 4 pillars. First pillar, it is the criminal prosecutions for the war crimes and human rights violations arising out from the armed conflict. Secondly, it is the reparations for the damage brought about by the armed conflict. Thirdly, this is the right to truth. And fourthly, this is the institutional reforms which should be undertaken in order to foster to avert something in the future. To this end, transitional justice paves a way for fostering human rights, promotion of rule of law, and last but not the least, it is aimed at eradication of impunity.
So how all of this complicated structure that you have just explained is to be implemented in Donbass?
This is very sensitive and topical issue for the Ukrainian society and Ukraine in general, and there is no clear-cut answer to this due to a number of reasons. There is no unique transitional justice model which could be just transferred from outside to the domestic context. In this respect, it should be taken into account a number of sensitive circumstances, for example, the political context, the reasons for the armed conflict, social and other contexts, and this should be combined in one model. And in this respect, the roundtable, which was held just a couple of days ago and hosted by the Committee on Human Rights, deliberated on the possible and best suitable transitional justice model which could be applied someday in Ukraine. And it was a high-level roundtable which was represented by a number of people and experts in the field who suggested their views in this respect. And peculiar attention should be paid to international standards, which are an integral part of the transitional justice, which should be in conformity with transitional justice. For example, I could just highlight some of them.
Please
First, this is the conformity and compliance with international law, namely with the provisions of international criminal law, international human rights law, and other legal obligations which come into play in different instances. For example, with relation to enforced disappearances, with respect to missing persons or questions of amnesty. Secondly, this is the human dimension of transitional justice. This is the underpinning of the whole process, which should be focused on human rights, on their universality and indivisibility, also principle of non-discrimination. The scope should be comprehensive of transitional justice. Thirdly, this is the focus on the victims. This means that the victims or those groups of people who are mostly affected by the armed conflict should articulate their needs in order to be envisaged in the transitional justice process, and this would enable to legitimize this transitional justice in the eyes of these people, and to enable them to feel that they have the right for this transitional justice model, and thus making it more successful in the very end. And this is, of course, is very challenging. Fourthly, this is the active engagement and partnership with the civil society, which is the continuation of the previous point, and this would make the transitional justice more successful to our mind. Next point refers to the domestic context, which should be taken into account by all accounts, due to the fact that the existing standards of transitional justice, they are good, but they do not fit each country. And last but not the least, the transitional justice also should be done in combination with other initiatives which have a broader context and aimed at rule of law.
Clearly, Ukraine is not the only country that is dealing with the war right now and will have to be dealing with the post-conflict issue or the term. There are other countries who have been through this before. The experience of which countries could Ukraine take and implement?
This is the good question and a good experience to look backwards. Of course, we cannot take all of the experience, supposedly the best experience. And in this respect, I could outline, for example, some of instruments which could be implemented in Ukraine. For instance, the truth commissions, which one of the best examples of such commissions was existing in South Africa. And this is the good platform for the victims in order to hear the truth from the perpetrators who were allegedly responsible for the human rights violations. Of course, this sounds quite optimistic at the first glance, but on the other hand, it was quite a success for the South Africa. But still, there is a number of questions whether it will be applicable for Ukraine. Exactly. At least the draft bill, which was co-sponsored by the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union, suggests such an instrument among other instruments, which were also co-sponsored with our partners, namely ex-Office of Ombudsman, a number of MPs and partner organizations. And we believe that this instrument could be implemented and would also reflect the victim dimension, which is very peculiar for the transitional justice and its success.
As an outcome of the roundtable that has been held, was there any formula created? I don't know if there is a possibility to create a universal formula to deal with the post-conflict term or a time period in any country, but nevertheless, did you have an outcome, like a solid solution?
Actually, this roundtable was the follow-up to some previous initiatives which were related to transitional justice, and we are moving forward. And according to the outcomes, we have elaborated the recommendations which are directed to the state authorities and other related governmental bodies with respect to pushing the issue of transitional justice. And integral part of these recommendations, this is the roadmap, which is based on the draft bill which was discussed within the roundtable. So we are very open for the comprehensive discussion and involving other interested parties. We are very open to it in order
Meaning Ukrainian government?
Meaning Ukrainian government, meaning a number of NGOs and other interested parties in order to get the feedback, to have peer review. Some peer review we have already received, and we see some shortcomings and flaws because our draft bill is not an ideal one. We are aware of that fact, but we are very committed to take into consideration all the comments and to make it better on the further stage. And one of our nearest steps and ambitions is to register this bill in the parliament and to move on with the further deliberations.
Do you have any international experts giving you pieces of advice while constructing this draft bill?
Actually, personally, I urged to involve international experts, which I have at my disposal or through my colleagues. In order to mention, this is the expert from Cambodia who previously served in the war chambers in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm in close dialogue and contact with him. Secondly, it is the ICRC mission to Ukraine based in Kyiv. And thirdly, this is the Global Rights Compliance. This is the international law firm which is based in Kyiv and is implementing international humanitarian law in terms of ongoing armed conflict, and their input was very valuable one and enabled us to make considerable improvements.
Thank you so much for coming and clarifying the whole situation for us.
Thank you.
That was Taras Tsimbrievsky. He is the head of USAID Human Rights in Action program. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned with UATV for more.